Dragon King Ardan Kharrow sealed Sera Pell's ash Insectarium 1 hour before the oath renewal because his court feared one sound more than dragonfire. Tiny wings behind ash glass. The nobles stood beneath the black arches of the oath hall, in silk, gold, and ceremonial ash, waiting for the old vows to be renewed before the dragon throne. Their scrolls had been brushed with pearl dust. Their seals had been warmed over altar flame. Their hands were clean enough for public loyalty. Above them, dragon banners hung from chains of smoked silver, each one painted with Ardan's burning crown. Below the hall, among charred cedar hives, ash glass cases, and furnace-warmed stone, Sera Pell held the smallest creature in the kingdom against her palm. The fire beetle glowed like a coal caught inside amber. It did not bite her. It did not crawl into her sleeve. It lifted its ember-bright wings once, then settled beneath the curve of her thumb, trusting the hand that had fed it oath ash, cedar smoke, and drops of ink scraped from promises no noble had ever bothered to read. "Put it back," oath curator Lethric Dane said. His voice was smooth enough for court, but Sera heard the strain beneath it. Lethric never feared large things. He walked past dragon statues without bowing and corrected old nobles without blinking. But he had always hated the Beetles. Not because they were filthy, because they recognized what beautiful ink tried to hide. Sera raised her eyes. The renewal starts in an hour. The Beetles must breathe open flame before oath ink is raised. They will breathe nothing. Lethric held up a black iron key ring. By order of the Dragon King, the ash Insectarium is closed until after the ceremony. The words moved through the chamber, colder than winter water. Behind Sera, hundreds of fire beetles stirred in their ember hives. They were no larger than thumb joints, with shells like ruby, garnet, smoked topaz, and deep gold. Their wings made a sound like soft sparks falling through silk. To the court above, they were vermin, ash crawlers, furnace insects, things that belonged under stones, not near royal vows. To Sera, they were witnesses. "No," she said. Lethric's brows lifted. Around him, 2 oath guards shifted their spears. "No," he repeated gently, as if giving her one chance to remember she was a servant. Sera closed her fingers around the beetle before it could leap toward his sleeve. "They have never harmed an honest oath. They eat scrolls. They eat oath, ink mixed with stolen burial ash." The chamber went too quiet. Lethric's smile did not change, but something behind his eyes tightened. "Careful." Sera stepped between him and the nearest hive. That is why they were bred beneath dragon law, not to judge love, not to choose loyalty, only to find ash taken from the dead and buried inside living vows. Her father had died copying servant oaths no noble ever read. Night after night, he had bent over gray vellum until smoke ruined his lungs and ink blackened the lines of his fingers. When he died, the oath office sent back his work apron, his cracked bone pen, and one ledger page with his name scraped thin. Only the Beetles had refused to eat that page. That was when Sera had understood. Small creatures could honor what great halls erased. Lethric glanced toward the stair. "Sentiment does not govern renewal law." "No," Sera said. "Ink does." The fire beetle in her palm glowed brighter. Lethric did not fear the Beetles eating noble vows. Sera saw that now. He feared them recognizing servant ash inside noble ink. Then footsteps descended the iron stair. No one had to announce the king. The fire did. Every ash lamp along the walls bent toward the stairwell, flames lowering like courtiers bowing before a crown. The chamber warmed by degrees, not from kindness but from power arriving in human shape. Dragon King Ardan Kharrow entered the ash Insectarium in black scale armor, edged with dull gold. He was tall enough to make the low furnace ceiling feel suddenly wrong. His hair was dark bronze, tied at the back with a strip of burnt leather. A scar cut from his right temple to the edge of his jaw, pale against his brown skin. His eyes held the dangerous amber of banked flame, the kind that looked controlled only because it had not yet chosen what to destroy. Sera lowered her head, because everyone lowered their head to Ardan Kharrow. The beetle in her palm did not. It crawled to the edge of her fingers and opened its wings toward him. Ardan stopped. For one breath, his face did not look like a king's face. It looked like a man recognizing a warning he could not yet name. Lethric stepped smoothly into the pause. "Majesty, the girl has refused closure." "The girl has a name," Sera said. The room changed. The guards looked at her as if she had drawn a knife. Lethric's mouth tightened. Sera Pell forgets the ceremony waiting above her. Ardan's gaze moved from Lethric to Sera. "Do you?" His voice was lower than she expected. Not soft, never soft, but quiet enough to force truth closer. Sera swallowed. "No, Majesty." "Then why refuse?" She opened her palm. The fire beetle painted her work-worn skin in red gold light. "Because oath ink should be tested before renewal, not after everyone has bowed to it." A few sparks moved under Ardan's skin at the base of his throat. For an instant, Sera saw darkness at the edge of that glow, a black vein running through royal fire. Then his collar covered it. Lethric saw her looking. His voice sharpened. "The beetles are not lawful witnesses. They are dirty furnace, things kept alive by a servant who mistakes feeding insects for understanding oaths." Sera felt the insult land where it always landed. Not on pride, on years. Years spent in ash heat while nobles walked above her. Years protecting small, bright lives because no one else cared what quiet things could do. Years remembering her father's name because the oath office had nearly rubbed it out. Above them, the first bronze bell rang. 1 hour. Lethric turned to the king. "If the oath renewal fails before the third bronze bell, 3 border houses may withdraw fire, tax, gate soldiers, and dragon tribute before winter. They already whisper that your reign has weakened. If the hall appears infested, they will say Dragon King Ardan Kharrow needs insects to prove loyalty." That struck. Sera saw it in Ardan's eyes. Not fear for himself, calculation for a kingdom already too close to fracture. Ardan looked at the hives. "Can you keep them caged until after the ceremony?" "They are not meant to test ashes after vows are sealed." "That was not my question." "No," she said. "I will not cage them while stolen burial ash passes as devotion." Lethric whispered, "She threatens the renewal." Ardan's jaw hardened. Sera knew then that he would choose the hall, the banners, the border houses, the clean appearance of loyalty. For one breath, Ardan looked less like a king choosing order than a man hearing something small ask him not to become cruel. He lifted one hand. The ash glass doors sealed one by one. The sound was small, click after click after click. To the court, perhaps, it would have meant order. To Sera, it sounded like tiny coffins closing. The beetle in her palm trembled. Ardan looked at it, put it inside. Sera did not move. His eyes lifted to hers. "Do not make me take it from you." Something in his voice warned her he did not want to. That made it hurt worse. Sera set the beetle into the nearest hive. The glass sealed. For one breath, every beetle glowed white. Then the chamber went dark. Lethric exhaled, as if the kingdom had been saved from dirt. Above them, the second bronze bell rang. Ardan turned toward the stair. "Bring the oath scrolls." The curator bowed. "At once, Majesty." But as the guards carried the first ceremonial chest past the sealed hives, one narrow scroll slipped from beneath Lethric's sleeve and struck the floor. A servant oath. Not noble parchment, not pearl-dusted, cheap gray vellum bound in black thread. No one moved. Inside the nearest hive, the beetle Sera had released pressed itself against the glass. The seal cracked. Sera's heart stopped. The ash glass door opened by itself. The fire beetle flew out, bright as a falling star, past Ardan's hand, past Lethric's robes, past 3 untouched noble vows resting in the chest. It landed on the servant oath. Not the noble vows, the servant oath, and began to eat through the royal seal. The beetle ate through the royal seal before anyone could claim the servant oath was fake. The red wax did not melt. It blackened. A thin line of smoke curled upward from the dragon crest, smelling not of burned resin or ceremony fire, but of cold graves after rain. The fire beetle moved with delicate precision, its ruby shell glowing brighter with every bite. It did not tear the parchment. It did not touch the cheap gray vellum. It ate only the seal, only the inked edge where authority had been pressed into something that did not belong to it. Lethric's face went perfectly still. That was how Sera knew he was afraid. One of the oath guards reached for the scroll. "Do not touch it," Sera said. The guard stopped because Ardan Kharrow had not moved, and when the Dragon King stood still, Wise men waited to discover whether stillness meant thought or violence. Ardan looked down at the servant oath. Explain. Lethric bowed his head a fraction. A lower registry error, Majesty. Servant parchment should not have been carried with renewal vows. The beetle bit deeper. The royal seal split open like a burned mouth. Ash spilled from beneath the wax. Not much. A pinch. A breath of black dust fine enough to vanish if anyone exhaled too hard. Sera went cold. That is not registry ash, she said. Lethric turned on her. You have done enough. No, Sera whispered. Not yet. The fire beetle stopped eating and lifted its wings. The ash did not scatter. It gathered into a line across the floor, each grain moving as if remembered fingers were trying to write without a hand. Ardan's eyes narrowed. The shadow at his throat pulsed once beneath the collar. Sera knelt. The nobles above could not see this lower chamber yet, but they could feel something had gone wrong. Footsteps shifted overhead. Silk rustled. The second bronze bell still vibrated through the stone, fading toward the third. Sera leaned close to the ash. A name formed, Marenvel. Beneath it, another line appeared, broken at first, then clear. House Nareth, loyalty signed in her breath. Sera looked up sharply. This is not a servant renewing her own oath. Lethric's voice cut like polished glass. It is a name, nothing more. It says House Nareth loyalty. A house vow cannot be carried by a servant's breath. Ardan turned his head toward Lethric. Can it? No, Majesty, Lethric said. Not lawfully. The beetle crawled onto the exposed ash. Its glow shifted from red gold to white. Sera had seen that color only once before, on the night her father's scraped ledger page refused to burn. She was forced, Sera said. The room seemed to draw back from the words. She was made to carry House Nareth's loyalty after death, Sera said. That is why the beetle ate the seal. Lethric laughed once, too softly. A furnace girl reads politics from insects now. Sera rose. No, the beetle read what your seal tried to bury. Ardan looked at the servant oath again. House Nareth swore loyalty last winter. With whose hand? Sera asked. The question should have been impossible from someone of her rank. Ardan did not punish it. That was the first dangerous thing he did for her. He looked to the guards. Open the chest. Lethric stepped forward. Majesty, if we delay renewal now, the border houses will hear of disorder before the third bell. They will hear many things if this is true. If this is performed by her, Lethric said. And now the gentleness was gone. A servant whose insects escaped after she refused royal closure. She had the beetle in her palm. She touched the hive. She could have trained it toward any scroll she wished. Sera felt the accusation strike the room and spread. It was clever because it sounded reasonable to people who wanted her small. Ardan looked at her. Not with trust. Not yet. With attention so sharp it felt like a blade resting against her throat. Can you direct them? He asked. No. Can they be starved into choosing? Her answer came slower. They can be starved, but hunger makes them sleep. It does not make them lie. The fire beetle rose from the eaten seal. It flew toward the ceremonial chest. The guards stumbled back. Inside lay noble vows brushed with pearl dust, warm from altar flame, tied in silk cords. If Sera were lying, if the beetle wanted parchment, if hunger ruled it, the chest would become ash in a heartbeat. The beetle passed over every noble scroll. 1, 2, 7, 20. It did not land. The nobles gathering at the stair gasped when they saw the small ember light flicker harmlessly over their precious vows. Lord Nareth himself stood among them, pale beneath his ceremonial ash, one jeweled hand gripping the rail. The beetle circled once, then flew away from the chest, straight toward Lethric Dane. Lethric did not step back. That was almost worse than fear. He looked insulted that truth had poor manners. The beetle passed his collar, his sleeve, the silver keyring at his belt. Then it landed on the black ink pot hanging from his chain. Sera stopped breathing. No, Lethric said. The word was not command. It was dread. The ink pot cracked. Not shattered. Cracked with the clean, precise sound of a bone pen breaking in a dead man's hand. Black ink leaked down the silver chain, too thick, too grainy, glinting with ash that should never have been inside living oath ink. The fire beetle pressed its head to the crack and fed. Then another beetle hit the ash glass. And another. Across the chamber, sealed hives began to glow. Ardan's hand moved toward his sword. Sera stepped between him and the nearest hive without thinking. He stared at her. Move. No. His eyes burned. If they swarm the hall, they will not touch honest vows. You cannot know that. I do know. How? The answer cost her more than she wanted him to see. Because when my father died, Lethric's office sent home one scraped page with his name nearly gone. The Beetles would not eat it. Her voice shook, but she did not lower it. They do not eat names. They eat the ash of names stolen to bind others. The nearest hive cracked open. A stream of fire beetles poured into the air, not filthy, not wild, but luminous as jewels loosened from a crown, ruby, garnet, topaz, gold. They swept past Sera's hair, past Ardan's armor, past the noble chest, and gathered around Lethric's ink pot. The pot split wider. Inside the ink, black ash lifted in threads. Not one name. Many. Marinvel, Auric Sane, Tavarid, Pell. Sera's knees weakened. Her father's name hung in the air above Lethric's chain. Ardan saw it. For the first time, the accusation was no longer political. It had a daughter standing in front of him. So did Lethric. The curator's mask broke for one breath, and behind it was not panic alone. It was calculation already reaching for another lie. Above them, the third bronze bell began its first toll. The oath renewal had started, and every fire beetle in the chamber turned toward the oath hall. The first beetle reached the oath hall before the second toll finished. It came through the stair arch like a spark that had learned judgment, small and beautiful against the vast black chamber. Every noble eye lifted, every hand tightened around pearl-dusted parchment. The oath hall had been prepared to look eternal, obsidian floor polished until it reflected the dragon banners, bronze braziers burning blue at the corners, the dragon throne raised above 7 steps of black glass, and at the center, the renewal basin waiting with fresh oath ink dark as midnight. One fire beetle should have looked powerless in such a room. It did not. It circled the renewal basin once and left it untouched. Then 20 more beetles poured through the arch behind it. The court broke its silence in a wave of silk, armor, and fear. "Contain them!" Lord Nerith shouted, backing away from his own scroll. "The hall is infested." "They are not infesting anything," Sera said. Her voice should not have carried. She was still on the lower stair, ash on her sleeves, furnace heat in her hair, with Lethric's cracked ink pot bleeding black drops behind her. But the hall had gone too afraid to ignore small words. Ardan Kharrow stood beside her at the stair arch, one hand still near his sword, his face carved out of restraint. Lethric came up behind them with his chain hidden in one fist. "Majesty, the ceremony has begun. If the third bronze bell completes without renewal, the border houses may withdraw by dawn." "And if the renewal is fed by stolen names?" Ardan asked. A few nobles went very still. Lethric bowed. "Then let us prove it lawfully after the vows are secured." Sera looked at him. "After they are sealed." His eyes met hers, cold and bright. A servant who keeps insects beneath a furnace does not instruct a king on state law. Ardan did not look away from the hall. "Tonight she does." That was not tenderness. It was worse for Lethric. It was authority. The beetles swept over the first row of noble vows. Ruby shells caught the brazier light. Garnet wings flickered over pearl seals. They passed House Nerith's ceremonial scroll, then House Ashmere's, then 3 border pledges bound in silver wire. They did not eat. They did not scorch. They did not even land. Murmurs spread. Sera felt the room shift toward doubt, and doubt was dangerous because it could become truth or punishment, depending on who seized it first. Lethric seized it. "You see, they are disordered. They ignored the alleged corruption below. The girl's creatures are merely swarming toward flame." The first beetle turned in midair. It flew straight to the renewal basin, not to the surface ink, to the bronze spout above it. Sera's breath caught. The spout belonged to the king's own oath vessel, a sealed, dragon-headed pitcher used only during renewal. Every house vow would be touched from that vessel before it was raised. If the vessel was clean, the ceremony held. If it was tainted, every vow renewed through it could be challenged. The beetle landed on the dragon head. Its mandibles touched the spout. A hairline crack appeared. Lethric whispered, "No." Ardan heard him. So did Sera. The crack widened, and one drop of black ink slid out, thick with ash grain. The beetle ate the drop before it reached the basin. The hall went silent. Sera stepped forward. It was not only one servant oath. Lethric moved between her and the basin. Enough. Ardan's voice lowered. Move. Majesty, if she is permitted to turn the ceremony into furnace theater, move. Lethric moved. Not far. The beetles gathered over the king's vessel in a slow-burning spiral. They ignored the noble scrolls lying in the open. They ignored silk cords, wax seals, gold dust, and painted crests. They fed only where black ash had been mixed into the ink, prepared for renewal. Lady Mara of Ashmere made a sound like she had been struck. That ink was delivered by the oath office. Sera looked at Lethric. By him. Lethric spread his hands. Every renewal ink is blended from old oath ash. That is tradition. Old oath ash comes from vows properly ended, Sera said. This carries the dead who were never released. The beetles answered for her. They left the vessel. One by one, they flew through the hall and chose their places. Not all scrolls. Not even most. Only certain vows. A beetle landed on House Nerith's border loyalty seal. Another on House Cauldron's fire tax pledge. 3 circled House Ashmere's gate soldier oath before settling along the bottom edge where no noble hand had signed. A cluster of golden beetles descended on a tribute scroll belonging to House Vare, but only at the corner where the witness line had been scraped and rewritten. Where the beetles landed, the ink blackened. Where the vows were honest, the parchment stayed untouched. No chaos could have frightened the court more than precision. Lord Nerith stepped away from his own vow. This is a trick. The beetle on his seal lifted its wings. Ash rose from beneath the wax. Marinvel's name formed again, pale and accusing above the parchment. Lord Nerith went white. Ardan looked at him. Did your house sign through her? I do not know that name. The ash shifted. Marinvel, kitchen ash-bearer, died before winter pledge, breath bound to House Nerith. Sera closed her eyes briefly. Not because she was weak, because each name felt like a door opening onto someone who had been used after death and denied even the dignity of being finished. Lethric's voice rang through the hall. Majesty, if you allow insect readings to challenge noble seals, every border house will claim insult. Your enemies will not ask whether ink was tainted. They will say Ardan Kharrow's throne needs servant ash to stand. The words struck deeper than the accusation. Sera turned. Ardan did not move, but the darkness at his throat spread beneath his collar, a shadow vein through royal flame. For the first time, she understood that his secret was not only illness. Something in his own dragonfire was reacting to the forged oaths. The court's lies were inside him too. He looked at the renewal vessel, then at the vows, then at Sera. What happens if the third bell ends before renewal is completed? He asked. Lethric answered. Your reign enters oath, suspension. Sera looked at Ardan. What does that mean? No one answered. The beetles did. A final ember-bright insect rose from the king's vessel and flew toward the base of the dragon throne. There, below the first black glass step, rested a small sealed scroll Sera had not noticed before. It was not part of any noble house chest. It bore the royal crest and a strip of old crimson silk. Ardan's face changed. Not fear, recognition. Whatever lay beneath the throne was not court corruption anymore. It was his. Lethric stepped forward too quickly. That scroll is not for renewal. The beetle landed on it. The crimson silk began to smoke. Sera heard herself ask, Whose oath is that? The beetle bit once. Ash rose from beneath the royal seal. And before the third toll faded, a name began to form under Ardan Kharrow's throne. The name under Ardan Kharrow's throne formed slowly, as if the dead resisted being used one more time. Ash gathered grain by grain beneath the royal seal. The beetle did not rush. Its ember wings trembled over the crimson silk, each tiny movement sending a pulse through the black glass steps of the dragon throne. Around the hall, nobles held their breath. The third bronze bell had not finished tolling, but its sound seemed farther away now, as if even the bell had paused to listen. Sera stood at the foot of the stairs and watched the first letter appear. Yea. Her chest tightened. No. The second letter came. O. The room blurred at the edges. Furnace heat, ash glass, Lethric's cracked inkpot, The scraped ledger page returned after her father's death, all of it folded into this one impossible moment under the throne of the man who had sealed her hives. S. Sera stepped forward before she knew she had moved. Ardan caught the movement, not with his hand, but with his eyes. "You know the name?" She did not answer. The beetle bit the seal again. The final letter appeared. Pell. A sound left Sera, not a cry. Something smaller, something worse. The Oath Hall did not know what to do with a servant daughter's grief, so it pretended not to hear it. Lethric moved first. He reached for the scroll beneath the throne. Ardan's sword left its sheath before Lethric's fingers touched silk. The blade did not point at the curator's throat. It rested between his hand and the scroll. "Do not," Ardan said. Lethric's face paled, but his voice remained careful. "Majesty, that is not a public oath. It is beneath my throne. It is the accession scroll." The words struck the hall harder than any blade. Whispers broke open among the nobles. Accession scroll. Throne oath. First flame witness. The vow that had bound Ardan Kharrow's blood to the dragon crown after his father's death. The oath every house had accepted. The oath every tax, soldier, gate, treaty, and tribute had leaned upon for 7 years. Sera looked at the scroll, then at Ardan. He had gone still again, but this stillness was different. Not kingly, not controlled, struck. "You knew it was there," she said. Ardan did not flinch from her accusation. "I knew the accession oath was sealed beneath the throne. Did you know his name was inside it?" "No." The answer came too quickly to be political. That did not make it harmless. Sera's voice lowered. "But you stood on it." The court heard. Ardan heard. Something like pain moved through his eyes and did not leave. Lethric seized the opening. "Majesty, do not answer a servant as if she sits in judgment." "She does not need to sit," Ardan said. "The name is already under my feet." The beetles swirled above the throne steps, luminous and precise. They did not touch the crown banners. They did not burn the dragon carvings. They circled the accession scroll and waited, as if the next command belonged not to king or curator, but to the truth no one wanted raised. Lethric turned to the court. "If that seal is broken, the reign enters succession challenge. Every border house may suspend tribute. Every command signed beneath this throne can be questioned. Every enemy of the Kharrow crown will claim the Dragon King's rule was fed by servant ash." Sera looked at him. "Was it?" The hall shuddered around the question. Lethric smiled faintly, because he had forced the choice where he wanted it. "If the seal is opened before renewal completes, no one here leaves with certainty. You will not free a dead man, Sera Pell. You will only unmake the living king." Ardan's dark fire pulsed at his throat. This time, his collar could not hide it. Black edged the amber glow beneath his skin, spreading in thin veins toward his jaw. Several nobles recoiled. Lady Mera of Ashmere whispered a prayer. Lord Nareth stepped back so quickly, his heel struck the renewal basin. Sera saw Ardan's hand tighten around his sword. Not from anger, from pain. The forged oath was hurting him. Whatever had been mixed into his accession had not only held his reign together, it had entered the fire that answered his blood. His dragonfire was trying to reject what the court had told it to carry. "Majesty," Lethric said softly, "finish renewal. We can examine old ash after your reign is secured." Old ash. Sera's father reduced to a phrase again. Her grief sharpened into something clean. "No," she said. The word should not have mattered. But Ardan looked at her. Sera climbed one step toward the throne. 2 guards moved to stop her. Ardan lifted a hand, and they froze. She stopped below him, close enough to see the sweat at his temple and the black fire crawling beneath his skin. "My father copied oaths no noble read," she said. "He died with ink in his lungs. Your office scraped his name thin and sent him home like waste parchment. If his ash is under your throne, then he did not only die serving your court. He was made to serve after death." Ardan's jaw tightened. "I did not know," he said. "I believe you." That hurt him more than accusation. But not knowing did not keep you from standing above him. The hall was silent enough for the beetles' wings to sound like sparks in silk. Ardan looked at the accession scroll, then at the 3rd bronze bell rope swinging above the hall. The renewal was still open, barely. Lethric spoke with controlled urgency. If you open that scroll, you risk the throne. Ardan turned toward him. If I do not, I keep it by a dead servant's stolen breath. Lethric's mask cracked. A king must survive before he can be pure. No, Sera said. A king must know what he is standing on. Ardan closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, the amber in them burned through pain. Read the name, he said. Lethric went white. Majestu. Read it. No one moved. So Sera did. She knelt at the base of the throne, not in worship, but witness. The beetle lifted from the seal and settled on her wrist, warm as a coal but gentle as breath. She touched the crimson silk. The seal split. Ash rose in a black column. Not only Pell's name this time. A line followed beneath it. Royal accession, witness, carried by servant Death Ash, bound to crownfire, without release. Ardan staggered. The black veins at his throat flared. The braziers around the hall bent inward, their blue flames turning dark at the core. Lethric stepped back, eyes already measuring exits, allies, blame. Sera looked at the ash line, and then at the suffering fire under Ardan's skin. Who placed him there? She whispered. The accession scroll answered before anyone else could. Prepared by Oath Curator's office. Witnessed under emergency crown law. Signed for the absent king by... The ash stopped. Every beetle in the hall lifted at once. Their bodies turned white-hot. Ardan's dragonfire darkened from his throat to his heart. And from beneath the throne, a second hidden seal began to burn. Heat crawled sideways through the black glass steps. Not upward, as normal fire would climb. Not outward, as dragonfire would spread. The hidden seal burned in a thin ring beneath the dragon throne, circling the base like a chain drawn in flame. The fire beetles hovered above it, white-hot and trembling, but none descended to feed. That frightened Sera more than a swarm would have. They cannot eat it, Lethric said. There was triumph in his voice now. He had found ground under his feet again. The court heard it and leaned toward him, because people with rank always preferred a familiar liar to an unfamiliar truth. Ardan did not look away from the burning seal. Why? Lethric bowed his head. Because it is not forged oath, ink. It is a throne's safeguard. A silent seal placed during emergency accession. Sera stared at the fire circling the throne. A silent seal over my father's name. Over a traitor's interference, Lethric replied. The word struck her harder than she expected. Traitor. The hall accepted it too easily. She heard the small shift, the soft intake of noble breath, the tiny relief that came whenever guilt could be assigned downward. Ardan turned. Choose your next words carefully, curator. Lethric lifted both hands, palms open, the picture of wounded duty. Majesty, I am trying to save your reign from collapse. Pell was not a harmless copyist. He inserted himself into the accession record during the emergency after your father's death. The seal was placed to prevent his unlawful witness from poisoning the throne. Sera's voice came thin. My father never entered this hall. You were a child. I knew the ink on his hands. I knew the smoke in his lungs. I knew when he came home too tired to stand. He copied what your office gave him. Lethric's eyes sharpened. And yet, his ash lies beneath the dragon throne. The court murmured. Lord Nereth seized the line with desperate relief. Then this is not noble corruption. This is servant tampering. Lady Myera of Ashmere did not speak, but Sera saw fear move across her face. Not fear of Beetles now. Fear of what would happen if the throne itself became uncertain. The third bronze bell continued its slow toll above the hall. Time had become a blade. Lethric faced Ardan. Majesty, if you open that seal using Pell blood or insect crown, every enemy of Kharrow rule will claim your accession was contaminated by a dead servant's ambition. Finish renewal. Secure the crown, then investigate the lower office. After the oath is sealed, Sera said. Lethric ignored her. If renewal completes, the throne survives long enough to punish the guilty. If it fails, the border houses withdraw before winter. Fire tax, gate soldiers, dragon tribute, all of it. Sera looked at Ardan. The darkness beneath his skin had spread from throat to collarbone, black veins through amber fire. Pain tightened his mouth, but he did not let the court see him bend. That was the tragedy of kings, she thought suddenly. They were trained to stand straight, even when the throne beneath them rotted. Ardan looked at the beetles. They will not touch the seal. No, Sera said. Because it was not made to be eaten. It was made to stop a name from leaving. Lethric smiled. How convenient that she understands forbidden seals now. I understand cages. The words came before she could soften them. The beetles moved closer to her. Not swarming, not hiding, gathering. A few nobles stepped back, as if her grief itself had wings. Lethric noticed. His gaze dropped to Sera's hands. There is one way to test whether this is servant inheritance rather than royal corruption. Ardan's voice hardened. No! The refusal came too fast. Sera looked at him. So did Lethric. The curator smiled, very faintly. Majesty knows the law. A silent seal laid over a disputed witness can be opened by the blood of that witness line. Sera's stomach turned cold. Ardan said, She is not to be cut from my throne. For one impossible breath, the hall forgot to breathe. Not because the sentence was tender, because it was public. Lethric bowed. Then your reign remains under shadow. Sera wanted to hate Ardan for the hives, for the order, for the way his hand had lifted and turned small living witnesses into prisoners. But there, before a court that would devour weakness and name it law, he had refused to spend her blood. That did not absolve him. It made everything harder. Sera stepped past him. No, Ardan said quietly. She did not stop. At the throne base, she reached for the crimson silk wrapped around the accession scroll. A jagged edge of old seal wax had cracked into a point. Sera. Her name in his voice was not command this time. That nearly broke her. She pressed her thumb to the wax. Pain flashed. Blood welled dark red against ash and silk. The fire beetles went still. Sera let one drop fall onto the silent seal. The ring of flame turned white. Every lamp in the oath hall guttered. The beetles descended at last, not to eat, but to arrange themselves along the burning circle like living jewels marking a path, ruby at the east, topaz at the west, garnet along the north curve, gold near Sera's bleeding hand. The seal opened. Ash rose. Not in a column this time. In a shape. A handprint first, large, ink-stained, familiar from memory, because Sera had held that hand when she was small and believed fathers could not be taken by paper. Then words. Joss Pell, royal copyist. Living hand compelled under emergency crown law. Sera's breath caught. Lethric said, Compelled does not mean innocent. More words formed. Ash witness bound to accession because Dragon King absent from first flame. The hall erupted. Ardan's face went white beneath bronze skin. I was not absent, he said. Lethric answered too quickly. You were wounded, unconscious. The realm required sealing. Ardan turned slowly toward him. I lit the first flame myself. Silence crashed down. Lethric's mouth opened. Nothing came. Sera looked back at the ash. It was not finished. The beetles brightened until the throne steps shone like molten bone. A final line burned through the seal. If accession is challenged before renewal, secure the witness line. Secure. Not summon. Not protect. Secure. Iron ash cuffs slid from hidden grooves beneath the throne step and snapped open in the air. Sera stepped back. Too late. The cuffs flew to her wrists and locked around them with a sound like ash glass sealing. Ardan moved. So did Lethric. But the court saw only one thing. The Dragon King's accession seal had named Sera Pell as the living witness line. And the third bronze bell began its final toll. The ash cuffs did not drag Sera to the throne. They made the throne reach for her. Black glass steps groaned beneath the dragon throne as if something buried in them had woken hungry. The cuffs tightened around Sera's wrists, cold at first, then hot enough to make her breath catch. Ash moved beneath the iron like living dust, searching her skin, testing her blood, recognizing the line it had been built to imprison. Ardan caught the chain before it pulled her forward. The moment his hand closed around it, dark fire leapt from the cuff into his palm. He did not let go. The court saw the Dragon King's fingers blacken at the edges. They saw smoke rise between his knuckles. They saw his jaw lock against pain he refused to give sound. Sera saw something worse. The cuff was hurting him because the throne oath knew his fire. Let go, she said. No. Majesty, Lethric said carefully. The seal is acting according to emergency crown law. The living witness line must be secured before renewal completes. Secured, Ardan said, and the word came out like a threat. You meant imprisoned. I meant preserved from interference. Sera laughed once. It shocked the hall because there was no joy in it. My father's ash was preserved under your throne, she said. My name was preserved in cuffs. You have a strange reverence for keeping people where they cannot speak. The fire beetles swirled above her, bright and trembling, but none touched the cuffs. They passed close enough for her to feel their heat, then veered away. Lethric saw that too. Even your insects refuse the royal seal. Sera looked at the cuffs. They do not eat iron. No, he said softly. They eat ink, and there is no ink left that can save you. Ardan pulled harder. The chain did not break. Instead, the black veins beneath his skin spread down his wrist. His dragonfire answered the old seal, as if some part of his body had been forced to obey it for years. Sera's fear sharpened. Stop, she said. This time, he looked at her. His eyes were amber fire ringed with black king and wounded beast, both fighting inside the same face. If I stop, he said, it takes you. If you don't, it takes you too. That reached him. Not enough to make him release her. Enough to make Lethric panic. The curator raised his voice to the court. Witness the danger. The servant girl's blood has awakened a succession challenge during renewal. If the king breaks the seal, his reign falls into oath, suspension. If he protects her over the throne, every border house here has grounds to withdraw. Lord Nereth stepped forward, eager for survival. Then finish the renewal. Secure her afterward. Lady Mera of Ashmere looked at the beetles hovering over her own marked vow and said nothing. Cowardice did not always shout. Sometimes it waited in silk and hoped someone else would be named first. The final toll moved through the bell rope above them, slow and deep. Sera felt the cuffs pull again. A hidden groove opened at the base of the throne, revealing a narrow black slot shaped for two bound wrists. Not prison, position. The seal was not only meant to hold the witness line, it was meant to feed from it. Ardan saw it at the same time. His face changed. Lethric's mask tightened. Sera whispered, "What happens when my wrists enter that?" No one answered quickly enough. So she knew. The throne would accept her blood as continuation of Pell's coerced witness. The renewal would close. Ardan's reign would stand. The border houses would remain bound. The court would call the law satisfied. And Sera Pell would become what her father had been made after death. Useful. Silent. Ardan released the chain. For half a heartbeat, Sera thought he had chosen the throne. Then he stepped between her and the black slot. The hall gasped. Lethric went white. Majesty. Ardan did not look at him. The witness line will not be fed to my crown. If you block the seal, you break succession law. Then succession law will bleed in public. The words struck the hall like a thrown blade. Sera stared at his back. Broad, armored, crowned by firelight, and for the first time turned against the throne that had made him. Not toward her as possession, not toward her as rescue alone. Toward the thing beneath both of them. The cuffs trembled. The beetles changed course. They rose from Sera's shoulders, from the chain, from the throne steps, and flew outward in one luminous wave. Ruby, garnet, topaz, and gold filled the oath hall like living sparks shaken from a dragon's heart. They did not swarm faces. They did not touch skin. They went to the vows. Every noble scroll already marked by servant ash lifted under their tiny feet. House Nereth, House Ashmere, House Cauldron, House Vare. 3 border pledges, a fire tax oath, a gate soldier bond, 2 tribute renewals hidden under gold dust. The beetles bit at once. The hall filled with the sound of beautiful destruction. Forged seals blackened. Pearl dust fell away. Silk cords snapped. Ash rose from each vow, and names appeared above the parchment like spirits made of smoke and ember. Mardenvel, Oryxane, Tavarid, Pell. Others followed. Too many. Names taken from kitchens, stables, copying rooms, furnace pits, laundry yards, bridge gates, and burial carts. Servants dead and used. Servants bound after breath. Servants turned into weight beneath noble loyalty. The honest scrolls remained untouched. That was the cruelty the court could not escape. Not chaos. Selection, Lethric shouted. Burn the insects. A guard lifted a torch. Ardan turned his head. The torch went out in the guard's hand. No wind. No spell, Sera understood. Only the Dragon King's anger denying flame permission. Lethric stepped backward toward the renewal basin. You do not understand what you are destroying. Those oaths hold your borders. Sera looked at the names above the burning vows. No, they held your crimes. The cuffs on her wrists heated again, but this time the Beetles descended to the chain between them. Not to eat iron, to eat the ink inside the link grooves. Sera had not seen it before. Tiny black lines ran through the cuff metal, old oath script, filled into the iron and sealed by ash. The Beetles fed along those grooves, bright and precise. The chain split. One cuff dropped from her left wrist. Then the right. The black slot beneath the throne snapped shut, empty. Ardan turned toward Sera as the final toll faded. For one breath, the court had no king, no renewal, no clean vows, and no lie large enough to hide inside. Then the accession scroll beneath the throne unfolded by itself. A fresh line burned across it. If renewal fails, crownfire seeks the first oath holder. Ardan's dark fire surged. Sera looked at him. Who is the first oath holder? She asked. Lethric's smile returned, broken and terrible. Not him, he said. The dragon throne opened beneath Ardan's feet. The throne did not swallow Ardan all at once. It opened beneath him, with the patience of a thing that had waited 7 years to be fed. Black glass split into 4 smooth plates, drawing back from the center step. Below them burned crownfire, not gold, not red, but dark amber threaded with black, the same sickness that had been spreading beneath Ardan's skin. The court screamed. Ardan dropped one knee into the opening before he caught the edge of the throne step with one burned hand. Flame surged up around his armor. It did not consume him. It recognized him, climbed him, tested him, then recoiled as if his own blood had been signed with ink it hated. Sera moved before fear could become wisdom. She caught his wrist. The moment her hand closed around him, the crownfire steadied. Every noble in the hall saw it. So did Lethric. His smile widened, brittle and triumphant. There, the throne knows the witness line. Ardan looked up at Sera, teeth clenched against pain. Let go. No, you cannot hold me. I am tired of being told what small things cannot hold. The fire beetles circled them in a luminous storm. They did not dive into the crownfire. They flew between Sera and the open throne, their jewel-bright bodies reflecting in the black glass like scattered stars over a grave. Lethric raised his voice. Witness this. The renewal has failed. Crownfire has sought the first oath holder. Lord Nereth shouted over the panic. Then make her seal it! Sera turned her head slowly. The nobles who had spent years stepping over servants now looked at her as if her blood had become a door they might force open and before winter. Lady Mara of Ashmere gripped the rail. What does sealing require? Lethric answered too smoothly. A continuity vow. The living witness line places both hands into crownfire and affirms the accession. The throne closes, the reign stands, the border houses remain bound. Sera looked down into the fire. Both hands. Not a signature. Not witness. Offering. What happens to the witness line afterward? She asked. The silence answered first. Then Ardan did, voice rough. No. Lethric ignored him. The witness line becomes protected under throne law. Sera's laugh came out hollow. Protected like my father? The beetles above Lethric's head flared. Ardan tried to pull himself higher, but the crownfire gripped his armor and dragged him down another inch. Pain broke across his face before he mastered it. Sera's fingers slipped against his burned wrist. Listen to me, he said. I am. Do not put your hands in that fire. If I don't, it takes you. Then let it learn hunger. The words stunned her. They stunned the court more. Lethric's face tightened. A noble sentiment, Majesty, but a dead king cannot reform oath law. No, Ardan said, but a living one chained to stolen ash is not ruling either. The crownfire surged as if angered by truth. Sera nearly lost her grip. A beetle landed on her shoulder, then another. Heat moved through them into her arm, not burning but strengthening. Small feet, bright shells, tiny wings. Creatures the hall had called filthy became a living bridge between her and the king. She pulled. Ardan rose half an inch. The court watched, horrified not by magic, but by a servant woman dragging a dragon king away from his own throne. Lethric saw the balance shifting. He snapped his fingers at the oath guards. Secure her. If she resists continuity, the border houses will call her murderer of the crown. The guards hesitated, not because they loved Sera, because every fire beetle in the hall turned toward them. Ardan's voice cut through the smoke. No guard touches her. Then who saves the throne? Lethric demanded. You, with corrupted crownfire in your veins? Her, with insects and a servant's grief? Majesty, do not confuse guilt with law. Sera looked at him. Show me the law, she said. Lethric's eyes narrowed. The continuity vow, she continued. If you want my hands in crownfire, show me the written law that says witness means sacrifice. The nobles shifted again. It was a small thing, a question, but courts feared questions when they arrived before procedure could close its teeth. Lethric said, This is not the hour for archives. Then it is not the hour for my blood. Ardan looked at her, and through pain, something like fierce pride moved across his face. Lethric turned toward the renewal basin. The law is held in the curator's custody. Then open your custody. The words were Ardan's. Lethric froze. Ardan's burned hand tightened around the throne edge. Bring the continuity codex. Majesty, the third bell has ended. The renewal. Bring it. A young oath attendant broke from the lower stair and ran toward the side archive before Lethric could stop him. Sera saw the boy's face as he passed. Terrified, thin, ash stained at the cuffs. A servant child of the oath office. One of Lethric's. The boy returned carrying a narrow black codex bound in dragonhide and sealed with a bronze clasp. His hands shook so badly the clasp rattled. Lethric stepped forward. Give it to me. The boy looked at Sera. That look told her everything. Fear, recognition. A warning too dangerous to speak. He handed the codex to Ardan instead. Lethric's mouth went flat. The Beetles descended before Ardan could open it. Not on the cover. Not on the clasp. Along the spine, where black ink had been worked into the binding grooves. Sera whispered, No. The Beetles fed. The codex spine split. A hidden strip of gray vellum slid from inside the dragonhide cover and fell across the black glass step beside Ardan's hand. Lethric lunged. Sera released Ardan with one hand and caught the strip first. For one terrifying heartbeat, crownfire roared higher around Ardan. Then the beetles on her shoulder flared white, and the fire steadied again. The vellum was thin, cheap, servant-grade. Not law, a replacement. Ash lifted from it in black grains, arranging itself into the line that had been cut from the accession scroll, signed for the absent king by oath curator Lethric Dane. The hall went silent. Ardan looked at Lethric. You signed my accession as if I were absent, he said. Lethric's expression changed, and the careful servant of order vanished. What remained was a man who had built a kingdom's obedience around one forged moment and could not bear to see it named. You were too wounded to understand what the realm needed, Lethric said. Ardan's voice was soft. I lit the first flame. Yes, Lethric said, and I made sure it obeyed. The crownfire beneath the throne answered. It rose in a black gold column around Ardan's body. Sera screamed his name, and from inside the flame, the fire beetles began to fall. Sera caught the first beetle before it struck the black glass. Its jewel-bright shell had gone dull, ruby darkened to coal, wings curled inward, as if the creature had flown through winter instead of flame. It lay in her palm, tiny and weightless, and for one breath all the hall seemed to shrink to the fragile thing she had protected since childhood. No, she whispered. Another beetle fell. Then 3 more. The crownfire roared around Ardan Kharrow, black gold and violent, rising from the opened throne like a judgment that had forgotten justice. Ardan stood inside it, with his hand braced against the throne step, armor smoking, skin marked by shadow veins, and eyes fixed on Lethric Dane. Not pleading, not even afraid. Furious. You made my fire obey you, Ardan said. Lethric's face had lost its courtly softness. I made your reign survive. You forged my absence. I preserved the crown when you were too wounded to see what hesitation would cost. I lit the first flame. And the border houses would have questioned it by dawn. Lethric snapped. Your father was dead. Your enemies were awake. The old dragon houses wanted proof that your fire would bind. A clean accession was impossible. So you used Joss Pell. I used what the Oath Office had. Sera closed her fingers carefully around the dying beetle. For years, she had been told small creatures were filth because they crawled close to ash. Now she understood what truly frightened the court. The beetles did not make filth. They survived where filth was hidden. She lifted her head. You did not use what you had. You stole what could not refuse. Lethric turned on her. And what would you have done, furnace girl? Let the throne fall? Let 3 dragon houses tear the crown apart before winter? Servants die when kingdoms fracture. I made their deaths useful. The words landed across the hall like a slap. A few nobles looked away. Not in horror, in recognition. Sera saw then that Lethric had not acted alone in spirit, even if his hand signed the lie. The court understood useful deaths. They had built entire traditions around not saying the phrase aloud. The beetle in her palm twitched. A spark returned beneath its shell. Sera looked down. The creature was not dying from the heat. It was starving inside false flame. Crownfire should have fed oath creatures. It should have carried old vow ash, properly ended, clean enough for renewal. But this flame had been trained for 7 years to burn around stolen witness. It had nothing true to give them. Sera stepped toward the throne. Ardan's gauze cut to hair. Stay back. You are not the only one being burned. He looked at the beetle in her hand. Pain moved through his face, quick and unguarded. She held the beetle up. They are falling because your crownfire has been taught to carry names without release. Lethric laughed harshly. Now she diagnoses royal flame. No, Sera said. I feed what you starved. She turned toward the hall. Bring the servant oath chest. No one moved. Lethric's smile returned in pieces. There is no servant oath chest in the oath hall. Sera looked at the ash-stained attendant who had brought the codex. The boy went pale. Ardan saw him. Where is it? The king asked. The boy's throat bobbed. Below the renewal basin, Majesty. The court shifted. Lord Nerith whispered something to House Cauldron. Lady Mara closed her eyes, as if confirming a fear she had carried too long. Lethric stepped toward the boy. You will be silent. Ardan's voice cut through the flame. He will answer. The boy dropped to one knee, shaking. Every noble vow renewed tonight has a lower copy, Majesty. Servant-bound, gate workers, furnace hands, copyists, ash-bearers, tribute haulers. If a noble house defaults, the lower copy holds the labor line until the debt is paid. Sera felt the words enter her like cold water. Lifelong dragon service, she said. The boy did not look up. Sometimes longer. The beetle in her palm flared. Not enough. Sera walked to the renewal basin. 2 guards moved to block her. Ardan, still inside the crownfire, lifted one burning hand. The guards stepped aside. Beneath the basin was an iron drawer hidden behind dragon-carved panels. Sera pulled it open. Gray scrolls filled the drawer. Not pearl-dusted, not silk-bound, not warmed for public loyalty. Cheap servant vellum tied with black thread, each one pressed with a small version of a noble house seal. Hundreds of promises beneath the visible promises. Hundreds of lives made into foundation, while the upper hall praised honor. Sera picked up the first scroll. The beetle crawled from her palm onto it. It did not eat. Instead, its ruby shell brightened. A true oath. One servant had signed willingly. Sera laid it aside. She picked up the next. The beetle bit through the seal at once. Ash rose. Tava Reed, furnace hauler, bound after death to House Cauldron fire tax. A sound moved through the lower servants gathered at the stair. Grief, anger, recognition. Sera lifted the scroll high. This is why the beetles must test servant oaths beside noble vows, she said. Not after, not below, beside. Lethric's face twisted. If you open that drawer, the renewal collapses. It already collapsed, Ardan said from the flame. His voice shook now, not with weakness, but with the cost of staying upright. Open them. One by one, the beetles rose. Fallen shells brightened as Sera fed them truth. Ruby, gold, topaz, garnet. They left the scorched floor and streamed to the servant chest. They passed over willing oaths untouched. They consumed the seals made with stolen ash. With every forged bond they broke, the crownfire around Ardan changed. Less black, more gold. Lethric saw it and lunged toward the basin. Sera turned too late. Ardan did not. A blade of dragonfire snapped from the throne and struck the floor before Lethric's feet, blocking him without burning him. "You will stand," Ardan said. Lethric stared at the gold returning to the flame and understood what he had not expected. Truth was not weakening the throne. It was cleansing it. Sera opened the final scroll in the top row. The beetles did not merely land. They bowed their small glowing bodies around the seal. Ash rose before she touched it. Joss Pell, royal copyist, first oath holder by forced witness. Beneath it, a second line burned clear. Release the first oath holder, and crownfire returns to the living king. Sera looked at Ardan. He was still inside the flame, still suffering, but now the path had a shape. "What releases him?" Ardan asked. The scroll answered in ash. "A daughter's witness, freely given." Lethric whispered. "And if she refuses, the crown remains mine to interpret." Every beetle in the hall turned toward Sera. Sera did not move toward the crownfire. That was the first choice. The court had expected sacrifice to look obedient. A servant daughter stepping forward because a king was burning, because a curator had named law, because they expected her to become what her father had been made into. A life turned into weight beneath someone else's rule. Instead, Sera stood still. The fire beetles waited around her in a ring of ruby, garnet, topaz, and gold. Their wings hummed softly, not urging, not commanding, witnessing. Ardan Kharrow looked at her from inside the cleansing crownfire. Gold had returned to the flames around his chest, but black still threaded his throat and hands. Pain stood in every line of him. Even now, he did not say her name as order. Lethric did. "Sera Pell," he said, voice smooth again because desperation had taught it to polish itself. "Give witness, freely, before the crownfire rejects the king completely." She looked at him. "You do not get to use that word." "Which word?" "Freely." A murmur moved through the hall. Lethric's eyes sharpened. "The law requires your willing witness." "No, the law requires my father's release. You are trying to make my willingness into another chain." Arden's burning hand closed around the throne edge. "What do you need?" The question cut more deeply than any command would have. For so long, no one in a hall had asked Sera what truth required before deciding what her hands must pay. She touched the inner seam of her ash-stained apron. There, wrapped in furnace cloth and kept close through every feeding, cleaning, and insult, was the scraped ledger page the oath office had sent home after Joss Pell's death. His name had been rubbed thin enough that candlelight almost passed through it. The beetles had refused to eat it when Sera was 17, and furious enough to offer them every trace of the office that killed him. She had carried it ever since. Sera unfolded it now. A few nobles recoiled, as if grief kept by a servant might contaminate the floor. The beetles lowered in the air. Lethric's face changed. "That page belongs to the oath office. It belonged to my father first. It is royal property." Sera looked at Ardan. He answered before she asked. "No dead man's name is property." Something inside her almost broke then. Not because it healed anything, because it should not have taken a king to say it, and still it mattered that he did. Sera stepped to the edge of the crownfire, close enough for heat to pull tears from her eyes. Ardan stood within the flame, armor smoking, face lit gold and black. If she reached too far, the fire would take her hands. If she gave too little, her father's ash would remain under the throne. "What does witness mean?" she asked. Lethric snapped. "Place the page in crownfire and affirm the accession." "No," Sera said. "That affirms the theft." The beetles flared. Sera looked at the servant scroll, still smoking beside the renewal basin. Witness means naming what was done. The crownfire bent toward her. Not hungry. Listening. Her voice shook once before she steadied it. Joss Pell was royal copyist. He was compelled under emergency crown law after Dragon King Ardan Kharrow had already lit the first flame. His breath was used without consent. His ash was bound beneath the dragon throne to carry a forged absence. His daughter releases his name from crownfire, not to affirm the accession. To separate the living king from the dead man forced beneath him. The oath hall did not breathe. Sera held the scraped page over the flame. Ardan's eyes met hers through gold light. "You owe me nothing," he said. Lethric hissed, "Majesty." Ardan did not look away from Sera. "Nothing." That was the second choice. Sera let the page fall. The crownfire took it gently. "No you." Ash rose, pale instead of black, and for the first time since Sera had seen her father's name under the throne, it did not crawl like something trapped. It lifted. Just Pell. The letters brightened once above the fire, then dissolved upward into clean gold sparks. Every fire beetle bowed in the air. The crownfire around Ardan turned gold. All at once, the black veins beneath his skin burned out from throat to wrist, leaving him gasping against the throne step as if he had been dragged from deep water. Sera reached for him. This time, when their hands met, no dark fire leapt between them. Only heat. Living heat. The hall saw the Dragon King rise from his own throne fire, holding a servant woman's ash-marked hand. No one dared speak first. So Lethric did. "Beautiful," he whispered. Sera turned. He stood at the renewal basin with his curator chain wrapped twice around his bleeding hand. While the court watched the release, he had gathered the cracked inkpot, the hidden codex strip, and 3 half-eaten noble seals. Black ash dripped from his fingers into the basin. Ardan's voice went cold. "Step away." Lethric smiled at him, with all gentleness gone. "You were always too sentimental to rule cleanly." The renewal basin darkened. The fire beetles shrieked. It was a tiny sound, almost too small for the hall, and yet it pierced every flame. Lethric plunged his hand into the basin. Black ink surged upward, not as liquid, but as names braided into smoke. Marinvel, Tava Reed, Oryx Sane, others. Servant names already half-released, seized again by oath ink before they could rise clean. Sera lunged. Ardan caught her back from the basin, just as black ink snapped upward where her face had been. Lethric raised his soaked hand. On his palm, a curator's mark burned open, a black scale over a quill. "I did not need the throne to own the oaths," he said. "I only needed kings to believe seals were cleaner than hands." The noble vows around the hall lifted one by one, honest and forged alike. The beetles scattered, confused for the first time. Sera's heart dropped. Lethric was mixing everything. If true vows and forged vows burned together, no creature could prove selection. No court could separate guilt from loyalty. The nobles would call it chaos, and chaos would bury the dead again. Ardan stepped in front of Sera, gold fire rising along his arms. Lethric laughed. "Burn me, Majesty, and you burn the basin with every name inside it." Sera looked at the swirling black ink, then at the beetles faltering in the air, then at her own empty hand, where her father's page had been. The crownfire behind Ardan whispered once through the throne. Not to him, to her. First witness released. Second witness required. Every flame in the oath hall turned toward the curator's bleeding hand. Lethric Dane closed his fist around the black ink. For a heartbeat, the oath hall looked as if it might obey him. The noble vows hovered in the air, true and forged alike, pearl dust falling from them like pale snow. Servant scrolls trembled in the open drawer beneath the renewal basin. The fire beetles scattered through the smoke, their jewel-bright bodies turning in uncertain circles because the curator had done the one thing they were never bred to judge. He had mixed the clean with the stolen. Sera felt panic rise in the court like heat before an explosion. If confusion won, truth would become spectacle. If spectacle won, nobles would call every name unreliable. By dawn, the border houses would say the insects had gone wild, the servant girl had broken renewal, and the Dragon King had let grief ruin law. Lethric knew it. His smile returned fully. "See," he said, lifting his soaked black hand. "No selection now, no clean test, no lawful witness, only ash, insects, and a servant who lost control." Ardan's gold fire flared along his arms. Sera caught his wrist before he moved. "Do not burn him. He is holding the names. That is why." Ardan looked at her. The court saw it. A Dragon King in cleansed crownfire waiting for a furnace girl to tell him where violence would fail. Sera stepped past him toward the basin. The black ink snapped at her like a living serpent. Ardan moved with her this time, not in front of her, but beside her, his fire shielding her without taking the choice from her hands. Lethric's eyes narrowed. You cannot separate what has been joined. Sera looked at the Beetles faltering above the hall. No, she said, but I know what they need. She turned to the servant drawer. Bring every lower oath forward. No one moved. Then the ash-stained oath attendant who had given Ardan the codex bent down and lifted the first bundle of gray scrolls. Another servant joined him. Then a furnace woman. Then 2 gate boys in patched livery. Soon the lower steps filled with hands that had carried the kingdom without being named by it. The nobles watched in horror as servant oaths were placed beside their pearl-brushed vows. Beside, not below. Sera lifted her voice. The Beetles were never made to judge noble honor from a distance. They test ink by what it carries. If a noble vow is true, it can stand beside the labor it commands. If it needs stolen ash, let everyone see whose dead were used to hold it up. Lady Myra of Ashmere stepped forward first. Her hands shook, but she placed her house vow on the black glass floor and took the lower copy from a servant girl beside her. Test Ashmere. Lord Nareth hissed. Do not dignify this. Lady Myra did not look at him. I would rather lose a gate than keep one closed by the dead. That broke the court's stillness. One by one, under Ardan's burning gaze, noble houses were forced to lay their vows beside the servant copies. Some did it with rage, some with terror, some only because the Dragon King looked ready to strip titles with his eyes. Lethric backed toward the basin. This proves nothing if the curator's ink remains mixed. Sera turned to him. Second witness required, she said. His smile died. The crownfire did not ask for my blood again. My father was released. The next witness is the hand that signed for the absent king. She looked at the black scale and quill burning on his palm. Yours. Lethric laughed, but it cracked halfway through. I am the curator. My hand is the office. No, Ardan said. Your hand is evidence. The words moved through the hall like judgment given a body. Lethric tried to throw the black ink into the basin. Ardan struck the floor with one hand. Gold crownfire rose in a ring around the renewal basin, not consuming it, not touching the names, only holding the ink in place. It trapped Lethric's hand above the water, like a thief caught reaching into a grave. Sera lifted one fire beetle from her shoulder. Its shell was topaz, bright again, warmed by clean crownfire. She did not command it. She only opened her palm between Lethric's hand and the servant's scrolls. Choose what was stolen, she whispered. The beetle flew. It landed on Lethric's palm. The curator screamed. Not because it ate flesh, because it did not. It ate ink. Black lines rose from beneath his skin, oath script hidden in the curator's mark, packed into the grooves of title, seal, and office. The beetle fed, and the mark split open. Names poured out in ash. Pell, Marenvel, Tavarid, Oryxane, furnace hands, copyists, gate carriers, burial washers, ash bearers, servants whose final breath had been mixed into noble loyalty, whose bodies had been turned into legal weight, whose families had been told duty was honor and silence was service. More beetles came. Ruby, garnet, gold. They covered Lethric's hand like jewels on a cursed crown, and ate only the forged oath script. The black ink in the basin separated. True vows settled clear and dark at the bottom. Stolen ash rose in a bitter cloud above it, each grain carrying a name. The noble scrolls fell back to the floor. The honest vows remained whole. The forged ones opened and released their stolen dead. No one could call it chaos now. It was too precise. Lethric collapsed to his knees, his curator mark gone, his palm clean and bleeding like any other man's. Ardan stood over him. Oath Curator Lethric Dane, by crownfire and creature witness, you are stripped of office. You will answer to every house you deceived and every servant line you bound after death. Lethric looked up with hatred bare in his face. Without those oaths, your borders fail. Ardan turned to the hall. Then let them fail honestly and be rebuilt lawfully. A long silence followed. Then the crownfire behind him rose once, gold and clear. The dragon throne closed, not over secrets, over released ash. Ardan faced the nobles, servants, guards, and frightened oath clerks gathered beneath his banners. From this night forward, no noble seal renews without its lower copy beside it. No servant oath may be hidden beneath house vows. Fire beetle verification stands above noble seal when stolen ash is suspected. Sera's breath caught. The public reversal did not come with cheering. It came with hundreds of lower room people realizing the law had finally named the work they had always carried. Ardan turned to her then. He was still king, but crownless in posture, all command stripped down to accountability. "I closed your insectarium," he said before everyone. "I called order what was only silence with better manners. Your creatures kept my court cleaner than my rituals did." Sera held his gaze. "You sealed them." "Yes." "You almost let Lethric make my blood useful." His face tightened. "Yes." She needed those answers more than apology. She needed the court to hear him not defend himself. Ardan lowered his head. Not deeply, not like a subject, like a king choosing not to stand above the truth. "I submit the throne to the ash test," he said. "Not once, always." The fire beetles rose around Sera, not swarming, crowning without touching. Their jewel light reflected in Arden's eyes, and for the first time the dangerous pull between them did not feel like possession, hunger, or command. It felt like a flame being offered space to burn clean. Sera opened the ash insectarium before dawn, not below the hall. Beside it, the hives were carried into a new chamber of black glass and gold mesh, open to the renewal floor. Servants came first with their gray oaths. Nobles came after with silk-bound vows. The beetles passed over honest ink like blessings and consumed only what had been stolen. At sunrise, Sera placed her father's cracked bone pen beneath the first hive. Ardan stood beside her, not touching, not claiming, waiting with smoke still in his hair and humility still raw on his face. "Will they remember him?" he asked. Sera watched a topaz beetle settle near the pen and glow. They already did. Arden's hand opened at his side, asking without reaching. After a long moment, Sera placed her ash-stained fingers in his. The fire did not darken. The beetles lifted into morning light, bright as living embers, and the Dragon Court learned that the smallest witnesses had always known which oaths deserved to burn.